Hi, everyone. Welcome to a brand new live episode of the Support is Sexy podcast. I'm so happy to have my dear friend with me, Candace Doby here, who's going to talk to us about courage. I want to tell you a little bit about Candace, and then we're going to dive right in because I'm excited to talk about her new book, Cool Girl's Guide to Courage. You're going to want to hear about it, okay? So here we go. Let's talk a little bit about Candace, and then we'll welcome her. Candace Doby is the founder of the Can Do Company, which is a speaking and coaching business dedicated to helping emerging leaders activate personal courage in order to perform to their potential in work and life. They've helped over 25,000 emerging leaders across the U.S. conjure up the courage and take worthwhile risks. Risks like speaking up with an unpopular opinion in a meeting, which is sometimes harder than we think, right? Don't make that out to be some small thing. And bringing their whole real self to every personal and professional space they occupy. So today, Candace is going to talk to us about defining your courage, taking up space, and again, her new book, Cool Girl's Guide to Courage, which is available now. Candace, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And anyone, if you have a question for Candace, please go ahead and drop it in the comments. You know, I always say you can do it now while you're watching live, if you're watching live, or do it during the replay. We're going to get back to you and answer your questions. But first, Candace, well, I know my first question was going to be, how do you define courage? But I actually want to ask you, how did you become passionate about helping other people find their courage?
I have actually acted courageously across my life. This is a theme that I had to uncover. I was working a corporate job like I know a lot of people. And one of the things that I actually loved most about my jobs over the span of years is helping the teammates that I had under me exercise their courage to stand up for an idea, to represent themselves authentically in the workspace or workplace. And really just, you know, as they climb the professional ladder, be able to help them conjure their courage. So it was a theme that came out at work that I really absolutely loved. And then I just kind of combed back through my experiences and found so many real experiences of me acting courageously. And I thought, you know, I have got to talk about this more and help more people conjure their courage. So that's kind of, you know, generally how it all kind of started.
How long ago was that for you?
Well, I stepped out and conjured some courage and started my own speaking business 3.5 years ago. So that's when I made the definitive move that I was going to spread the good news about courage full time. But I would say I've really been kind of on top of this theme, or this theme has been following me or part of my life for many, many years, you know, a couple decades. So, yeah.
What made you make the decision what gave you the courage to step out and start your speaking business and make that move in your own life at that time 3 years ago? What was that moment like for you where you felt like, I got to do this, even if I'm afraid, if you were afraid?
I was afraid.
Okay, I thought so. I didn't want to make assumptions, but I thought you might be.
I was afraid because I had all of I like to call it societal bling behind me, all of the things that people in society find powerful and necessary. So I had the 6-figure income. I had the company car. I was working from home before it was, you know, everyone was doing it in the pandemic. Frequent flyer miles. I mean, I had all the things, but what I was coming back to every couple of years, you know, you get a promotion and you're like, maybe I can do this a little bit longer. But what I kept—
the golden handcuffs, right?
The golden handcuffs. But what I kept coming back to was this kind of greater calling and purpose, which is, Candace, you've been able to open up so many possibilities for yourself and access so many different parts of yourself by acting courageously. And you've helped so many other people do that within your immediate sphere. Girl, it's time to help more people do that. So it was just that internal thought that wouldn't leave. And so I made a decision. I made a decision that this was going to happen. But I will say, Elayne, I planned for it. So it wasn't I made the decision and then the next day I quit my job. So I made the decision and then I quit my job a year later because I needed time to plan and prepare for stepping out into this unknown territory.
And that's the thing. Thank you for mentioning that, because that's something that when I interview women entrepreneurs like yourself, and we all talk about the leap of faith and, you know, all the wonderful analogies, if you will, I jumped out the airplane, all that. And it's like, but wait, we can plan for that. You don't have to just, spontaneously go up in the airplane and jump. You could say, okay, I need my my parachute. What's the flight plan? Where might I land? Just as much as possible. Even if you have to figure out a lot of things along the way, especially for everyone, Winfred says on here, well done, thumbs up. But for everyone, men, women, child, anyone, but especially for women, as we face so many obstacles along the way with either in corporate or going into entrepreneurship, how can we plan for this so it can be as easy and the least stressful as possible? So I love to hear that you took a year to sort of think about that.
Yeah. And as I like to say, every time we act courageously, risk is part of the equation, but that doesn't mean that we have to be irresponsible and take on all the risk. I mean, there's part of that risk that we can control, and there's part that we can't control. Like, what happens after you plan and prepare and then take the risk and turn some corners and find some things around the corner that you didn't expect. However, if you are quitting your job, I need to be able to live off of something, off of money. So that's part of the risk that we can control. So it's like, okay, save your money so that doesn't become a factor. And it only, what is out there are mainly the risks that you can't control and foresee.
I always say there's a big difference between risk and reckless. Right. Yeah. So if you want to be reckless, that's on you. There are a lot of things that can go wrong with recklessness. Right. But taking risks, like you said, as much as possible, you try to plan for it. And no one knows exactly the future. You can do all the planning in the world and it still might not. Well, it probably won't happen exactly as you think. Right. But do you think because you have prepared, it gives you more opportunities to focus on that problem and solve it as opposed to the problems you might have created for yourself by being reckless? Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say then is your definition now of courage?
I get this definition. Honestly, I've been researching courage on my own for over a decade. So I've read a lot of research papers, academic articles, and then I've combed through my own personal experience and watched other people as they act or don't act courageously. So I kind of combine all of that to come to courage is a choice to face a risk for a worthy purpose. So that's how I define it. And there are three really important parts to that. So it is a personal choice. So we don't get any credit. We don't get a pat on the back for doing something that someone else told us to do, because courage is a personal choice and has to come from a place within you. And then there's always going to be a risk or a challenge associated with acting courageously. If there is no risk, then there is no need for courage. That's what I like to say. You don't need it all the time if there's not a risk present. So there is a challenge that you are facing and you're facing it for a worthy purpose. So whether that's to pursue your purpose, and having to leave your corporate job, if it's the risk is humiliation or retaliation for something you want to say or do, there's always some risk, but you have to do it for a worthy purpose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why would you say most people, or women especially, my audience is predominantly women, a lot of women entrepreneurs and professional women, what have you seen has been the struggle with embodying courage for most of us? What keeps us from doing that, if anything?
Yeah, it's when we talk about professional women, or we talk about women who are creating art and, entrepreneurs and putting their art out for other people to judge, I would say fear of judgment is actually one of the biggest fears that I see. Fear of judgment and fear of failure. Of course, fear of humiliation too. So I would say that's the big three: fear of humiliation, fear of judgment, and fear of failure. So I think when you're in a professional space, let's say, you're an entrepreneur or you're working for corporate America, you're just afraid of failing. You're afraid of taking a step and stepping outside of your comfort zone because you don't want to fall flat on your face. You don't want to give up the things that you already have and the comforts that you already have for going after this thing that might not work out. So that's one really big reason that I see that people don't step outside of their comfort zone. Another one is just fear of judgment. I think this is for a lot of creative people. So you've got your creative entrepreneurs, they're, hosting podcasts, they're creating art or for other people to consume. And whenever we do something and put something out into the world creative, it's, I think, human nature to feel a fear of judgment. So a lot of people hold on to their great ideas and the beautiful art that they have inside of them. Art, not necessarily meaning like painting a canvas, but art in so many different forms, because they don't want it to be judged. And then I would say, fear of humiliation is we don't want other people laughing at us. We don't want to fall on our face. We don't want people to, isolate us because of something we've done. So that is a lot of what women deal with and why we don't, go outside of our comfort zone, take advantage of the possibilities that are beyond that because of those big three. I mean, of course, there are other things, Elayne, but I find that those are three big ones.
I find too that thank you, Sophia. Sophia Robinson says, "Hello, I'm so glad to catch you live. Excellent. Let us know, me or Candace Doby here, who is a courage coach and who has a company and a speaking business and she talks about courage to individuals, organizations, and emerging leaders. So let us know if you have any questions. Let me see. Sorry, I just a message pop. Everything's popping up here. We got a lot going on here, people. Okay. We got a lot going on. I'm like, just going to be real. You see me like, okay, what's going on? Let's stay focused. All right. So I was going to say, Candace, though, just to speak about what you said about judgment, I think, as you said, judgment for, if we fail or things go wrong and that kind of thing. Do you find also that people sometimes are fearful of the judgment of even wanting a thing? Because sometimes I find that if we want to make you want to make a move, say you have all the, like you said, the societal bling, I love that, of your corporate position, and you have this idea and you want to build a speaking business, and the people who know about your societal bling and who maybe don't know the complete vision for the speaking business, it could make not you, but someone else who maybe doesn't have the full courage there yet to be like, I'm scared to even tell anybody that I want that thing. And that's what I find a lot of people and women I know kind of push that down, and then which causes stress and unhappiness and unfulfillment and all these other things because they're even afraid to want it or maybe to express that they want it.
Absolutely. And so it's fear of judgment from putting it out. It's fear of judgment from telling other people
right.
Put it out. I mean, it's fear of judgment all around, And the thing about that is that a lot of times, and I say this when people are telling us, oh my gosh, girl, you would be crazy for giving up your corporate job and your 6 figures. What are you doing? When that happens, people are not necessarily thinking about you. They are thinking about themselves. So they are thinking for themselves that this is something that I would not do. And they're placing their limitations and fears onto you. So I think we have to know that as female entrepreneurs, as women entrepreneurs, and everybody else that's here, is that when people caution you against your goal and your dream, it's because they themselves are projecting the fear that they have onto you. So.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to talk about, I have other questions, everyone. Please pop in if you have any, but I just can't wait to talk about Candace's book. I got it this weekend. I'm going to send it to my goddaughter. Can you see the whole thing on there? Send it to my goddaughter. She's only 7, I want to say. So it might be a little soon for her, but I don't know. It's never too soon. And she's a courageous little tyke anyway. So, but Candace's book is a cool girl's, this is your second book.
Yeah, and I can tell you the story behind that.
So it's a cool girl's guide to courage, available now. But tell us the story behind it. Then I want to ask you some questions from it.
Okay, so this is another courageous move. So the first book that I published is called If Courage Could Talk. If Courage Could Talk. And I had this idea when I first started my business. I was talking to younger people, and what I found is when I was, in front of them, these are like high school students, that courage was not a fun topic to talk about. But I recognize that, our ability to conjure courage, even as a high schooler, it determines the people we will become. So I felt like it was a really important message to talk to them about. They were not excited about the topic of courage. So I figured out that I needed some kind of tool to help them think about and consider their own ability to conjure courage. So I created a voice for courage. If courage was your best friend, 27, doesn't have time for your limiting beliefs and your self-doubt, what would courage say to you? So I self-published that book, Elayne, and it's a book of quotes in the voice of courage. I self-published it, sold 1,000 copies myself, got the attention of a traditional publisher. So what we did was we took that book and we expanded it and reimagined it. And so the second version of that book is the book that just came out last week, which is A Cool Girl's Guide to Courage. And it's been expanded into a journal. There's lots of good stuff in there. So that's another courageous move. The reason why we need to put our stuff out there is because we need to put it out there, but it can open up so many possibilities for you that you really can't imagine on your own.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that story. Also, it's an example of something I talk about all the time, of letting go of the how, which doesn't mean you're not going to do that thing with excellence. But suppose you had sat on your idea for courage. I love the idea of putting a voice or giving courage a voice and a personality and sort of an identity. But suppose you had sat on that all this time. Not only would we not have your first book, we wouldn't have the second book. with a traditional publisher, your first book, you showed that you have the audience and you're building. So that's another example. We could talk about book writing and selling. That's a whole other podcast. We could talk about that forever. But as an example of courage and thinking about I'm sure you probably read the book, The One Thing. I reread it or re-listened to it again recently. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And the whole premise of it is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? So when thinking about, your vision or what you want to create, and you could say, what's the one thing I can do today? What's the one thing I can do for this week? What's the one thing, you can map it out all the way up to however long, 5 years even, but it's always going back down to what's the one thing I can do in this moment. Like for me, almost 6 years ago, it was starting a podcast, going all in on a podcast, doing it 5 days a week, which was crazy. But I just felt like nobody I know is doing it like that right now. Black woman interviewing only women entrepreneurs. And it was the one thing I did like full on for 2 years. Not that you don't do anything else, but you're thinking, what's the one thing that can make everything else that I want to do as far as building a brand, connecting with women, building a community? It made that easier, or some things that just made, I don't have to do that anymore because I focused on this one thing. For Candace, I would guess, and she'll tell me if I'm wrong, really saying, I'm going to go ahead and publish this book myself, get this out into the world, share it with as many people, and then look at now hustling and finding a traditional publisher and those things that became unnecessary because it came to you.
Yes.
Would you say there you go.
Yeah.
I love it.
Absolutely.
All right. So I love this version. I sent Candace a message over the weekend, like, I got my book. I love it. That's how I was screaming, if you couldn't tell that via text. All right. So I went through and did some sticky notes, y'all. I'm going to show you. So here's the first one, Candace. I need a manicure. So don't look at my nail. Oh, wait. All right, everybody. Why are you sleeping on yourself? Why are we sleeping on ourselves, Candace? Why do you find most of us are sleeping on ourselves?
A lot of us are sleeping on ourselves, and it might not be right now. It might be tomorrow. It might have been yesterday, but there's so much goodness and talent and skills and purpose inside of all of us. We all have an idea. We all have something inside of us that is trying so desperately to come out. But, societal bling, again, is all around us. So we think we need to go after climbing the corporate ladder and all the things that society tells us we need. And so we sleep on the ideas that might be, non-traditional, that might be
like book publishing.
They might be the ideas that are just really hard and we don't want to put in the effort or be uncomfortable to birth them. But at the end of the day, we all have something that we're sleeping on. So the question is, why are you sleeping? Why? Because there's so much greatness that is trying to come outside of you.
I love it. And Sophia says, courage is so necessary. Yes, fear of dreaming and making those decisions. She was talking about our conversation about the fear of judgment. Thank you for that. So this is the next section, everybody. You scared? Why you scared? All right. So this one, I love this. It says, fear is a lot like an engagement ring. Fear is a lot like an engagement ring on Facebook. It looks bigger than it actually is.
Yes.
You know what I felt like a lot of these moments were? Bloop, bloop, like bloop, bloop. Bloop, bloop. So I was like, I love that. So tell us about, why do we see fear often bigger than it really is?
Yeah. First of all, can we talk about the engagement rings that we see on Facebook? Okay, we're not going to talk about them, but...
And Instagram. I see them on Instagram.
Yeah. People putting their rings on there. It's all good. Do your thing. But, they appear very big and shiny.
So does the relationship.
Ooh, boo, boo. Boop, boop. Okay.
Like it seems big and shiny, but...
And fear is a lot like that. Fear is the thing, it's the voice in our head that seems overwhelming and can be overwhelming if we don't, free it with asking questions or with another voice, the voice of courage. But fear can feel so monumental. And it's really important when we are feeling fear to interrupt that feeling with asking ourselves questions and returning to the present moment. But also countering that voice with another voice, which is why I created this voice of courage. So it seems overwhelming. It seems like the annoying, ex-boyfriend or cousin that just won't go away. But it often is much bigger than it really is. It just, we have to interrupt the voice. We have to interrupt the voice in our head with something else. So that's really where I'm coming from with that quote is, it seems really big, but you have the power and the agency yourself to make it smaller.
And I think I want to make sure I point out to people what you have in the book here is not only, I'm showing the different pages with the quotes, but it's journal. Like she said, there's places like Candace said, I'm sorry to say she, like Candace mentioned, there's places for you to write down your thoughts and address some of those things to interrupt those negative thought patterns and that kind of thing. I think these quotes and images, graphics, I just love it. It's so great. It really gets you to, pay attention and it feels like a relatable voice. Like I know you and I talk about pop culture references and just tone and those kind of things that make it feel really like it can connect with the audience that is your intention. Okay, this is another one, you all. And Dawn Cotter Jenkins says, Candace, you are both inspirational. Well done. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, everyone. And we are talking to Candace Doby here about courage. If you're joining us, she's our courage coach and founder of the Can Do company. She's a book publisher and author with 2 books. Her new book is The Cool Girl Guide to Courage here. We're going through. So this one, did I mention this one yet? Question your fear like you question your confidence.
Yes. And that one, we're just going to add a finger snap on the end of it. So it's question like you question your confidence. Because that is what we do. We question if we're ready. We question if we're the right person for the new position. We question if we have the talent and skills to put this thing out into the world. Like, we question our confidence so often. We question the abilities that we have so often, and we overlook them. And the reason we do it is because looking at our weakness or looking at the things we're not good at is so much easier to do. And the negative is always going to be more consequential and more noticeable than the positive. So we question, do we really have what it takes? And so the thing here is like, no, question your fear. Question your fear like you question your confidence. What's the quote, Elayne?
Fear? Question your fear like you question your confidence.
Yeah. So it's just as much as you question, am I good enough? Question the fear that has entered into the space. Question why, why is this voice telling me I'm not good enough? Why is this voice telling me that this is going to end badly? Why is this voice telling me that we're not prepared? So when you interrupt that negative thought pattern with questions, then you really can return yourself to the present moment, as we talked about, but really start to understand that these are exaggerations that fear is having me believe. So as much as we question if we're good enough or how confident we are, we got to question our fear with the same level of intensity.
Excellent. And then I love this one. Get your grit together. Oops, yes. Decide. Get your grit together. That one I love. I don't know if you have a comment on it, but I just love that idea of getting your grit together. And I think what's interesting, going back to just a little bit about fear, or more so questioning ourselves, like you said, questioning our confidence. Yeah. It's funny because women, especially Black women and women of color, but Black women specifically, are the most educated now in the country, become fastest growing as far as education. We have, as my friend Mark Dawson says, he's a Black man. He's like, Black women have all the certificates, all the everything, all the anything in corporate, especially, all the credentials that you need. We have it, but we still question ourselves. And some of that is, on us, right? Questioning our confidence. But I always like to acknowledge some of that, like you said about societal blame, is societal injustices, right? And things that make us sort of have that position. And so I think, as Candace is saying, question the fear and the things internally. I would say be aware too that, okay, maybe society has told me because they won't pay me as much as, a white woman, even just because I'm a Black woman. There may be reasons that I'm thinking this way. However, I'm going to snap, like Candace says, snap myself out of it and say, why am I questioning myself? Is this a belief or is this the truth? And really looking at what you have, realizing what you have to offer.
Yeah. Am I gone?
No, you're still there. You're here.
Oh, my video went away on my side really quickly. What I'll say about that is I always mention when I'm talking about act courageously and conjure your courage, especially when you're a professional woman, when you're out here in society, yes, more broadly, but if you're working in the corporate spaces, there's always shared responsibility with creating a culture where courage is celebrated, where taking risk is celebrated and welcomed. So that's on the responsibility and ownership of the organization to do that, to create that space. There's also your responsibility, the individual's responsibility to really, we talked about taking up space, owning all that you have. We are so accustomed to playing small, shrinking ourselves, cowering. And so it's a personal responsibility as well to make sure that we are accountable to all the gifts that are inside of us. And we're doing what we have to do and need to do to exercise them and bring them out and demonstrate them.
I love it. Okay, there's another one here. There's no sense in looking back unless you're twerking. So tell us a little bit about on this side. Side's backwards. This side over here. No sense in looking back unless you're twerking. I love the little tomatoes. Look like tomatoes there.
I know. Say that yes, my illustrator for this book was amazing and really brought these quotes to
fantastic
life. But this one is all about, we want to look back in regret, or we want to look back and say, dang, I should have made that decision versus another decision. Or we want to look back, let's get personal, into relationships that we've had before. And we want to say, oh man, if only that would have worked out, whatever it is. We have a tendency to look backwards, but every time we do that, we're taking away from the energy and resources we have to move forward. And so the really fun way of saying this or communicating this to people is there's no reason to look back unless you're twerking. So if we're not twerking and dropping it like it's hot, then we need to be moving forward. Looking back isn't going to get us very far.
And we can end up, do you find that sometimes we get even stuck in the looking back? Like there is no, like you said, you're not moving forward if you're constantly looking back, or you're not even paying as much attention. I guess you're not present if you're constantly looking back on what didn't work, how it didn't work, other than to learn from it. That's the only thing I say. If you're reflecting, thinking, what did I do wrong? How can I learn from this? Sure. But a lot of us get caught in what didn't work and whatever didn't go our way. Okay. Another one. Last one here, risk, please, which we talked about a little bit. But what would you tell the cool girls about risk and the importance of taking that risk? You mentioned some of it earlier, but what are the reasons that we...
it's like, risk, please, like,
right.
Risk, there's a quote, and it basically says something like this. Forgive me for not knowing who said this, but the people who reach the fullness of their potential, and I'm paraphrasing, the people who reach the fullness of their potential are the people who make risk-taking routine. It's the people who take risk often. It's almost impossible to really tap into the fullness of your potential and all that you can become unless you take risks, like big and small. The daily risk that, trying a new restaurant. I mean, that's a small risk with very small consequences if it doesn't go right, but to really big risk. Stepping out and doing your own thing, asking for the promotion, creating the program, whatever it is. And so I think that's just the really important thing to know, is that if we want to really step into the fullness of who we are, then it's important to understand that you're only going to get there through taking risks.
Would you say, too, I think your point about the small risk of trying a new restaurant or maybe even a food you haven't tried before, I think sometimes we miss the fact that we took those risks, or that they're, like you said, they're small risks, but they're risks nonetheless. And they can be that you can make daily habits, weekly habits, or whatever cadence you want to use for taking. It's like everything else, right? It takes practice. So saying that the risk is going to be, my first big risk is going to be that I'm going to, quit my job next week. And then, like we said, you're going to blow up it does it have to be that? Or can it be like you went rock climbing for the first time, can it be something else?
Yeah, absolutely. And see, the thing is, when we start small, because you're right, a lot of people think they've got to do the big bodacious thing.
Right.
And it's like, start small, because the beauty in starting small is that you get to try out your skills and learn if they're reliable or not. When you're making a small risk of trying to figure out what new restaurant I want to eat at, you are building up your capacity to decide, and you're building confidence in your decision-making abilities. And so what happens is when you get to the larger risk, you can then depend on that confidence that you've built up by making the smaller decisions. So we don't need to discount those small decisions, because they add up and become the mound that we go back to and rely on when it's time for those really big decisions and risks.
What would you say is the one thing you want to make sure all the women watching, everyone for sure, but especially the women watching, remember about courage from you, someone who has, as you said, researched courage for a decade, who has exhibited courage in your own work, which I know from, knowing you now this past year and just through your work and everything. What do you want to make sure that people receive about this message?
I think I just want people to understand, we don't really talk about courage a lot. We talk about leadership broadly. We talk about bravery broadly. And, those things they're slightly different and nuanced. And so I just want people to think about their courage more. Maya Angelou has the most beautiful quote on courage that I love. And she says, courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. So it's foundational. If you want to be a creative person and put your art into the world, you can't do it without courage. Even if creativity is your value, you can't do it without courage. If you want to be a kind person, but you're met with an opportunity where kindness is very, very difficult, someone has almost insulted you, but you have a value of kindness. It's very difficult to do if you don't have a foundation of acting courageously. So the thing that I just want everyone to understand is that it's almost impossible to really live out our values. It's impossible to live up to the fullness of our potential without the foundation of courage.
Would you say, one other question about something that I know I sort of tangle with, if you will, this idea of women being fearless. Like, you have to be fearless. You have to be fearless. Is that, I see your face, I'm like, I wrote this in my book, a flawless, fearless badass. I'm like, that's a lot of pressure. I'm scared, but I'm going to try it, but I'm scared. Like, is it okay for me to not, what is fearless? So anyway, what are your thoughts about that?
Fearlessness,
especially as relates to courage.
Yeah. Fearlessness and courage are not the same thing. And sometimes I get like this little itch under my skin when I hear people interchange them, because they are not the same thing. What I like to say is that courage is really the path to fearlessness. And here's the other thing. It's really incredibly difficult to be fearless. Fearless by definition is being without fear. And it's a natural biological response that we have when we feel a threat. So to cancel the emotion of fear, which is what you are doing if you are acting or you are being fearless, to cancel the emotion of fear, what it takes is either mastery, or it takes being and acting rashly or hastily. So you either have to be a master, meaning that you've done the thing so many times to where you've managed your fear to zero. So, it could be that, Elayne does LinkedIn Live. It could be that she's done 1 million LinkedIn Lives. So because she's done them, you've done them so frequently, Elayne, you've managed your fear to zero. That's fearlessness. Or you are acting rashly. It means you have not considered all of the information in your orbit that you need to consider, and you're making a hasty decision. So you haven't really given your chance to feel fear because you're not considering the things that you should be considering. So unless you're doing one of those two things, fearlessness is really challenging to achieve. So that's why I say courage is like the means to it. Courage is having, the fear of rejection and isolation, all the things, but choosing your worthy purpose and depending and relying on your confidence and competence to do it. I don't like to say despite the fear, but to do it even when you feel the fear.
That is a snap. I love that. That is a snap. I love this idea of managing your fear to zero. It's different than saying it's just not present. It's like, how do I either through habit of doing these things over and over again, of practice and becoming a master at that thing, so I don't have a fear of that thing anymore. But it's not saying, like you said, the emotion of fear overall doesn't exist, because fear in some ways is a protector for us, right? Right. You need to. So it's a sensory sort of thing of being aware of things, and other things can happen, but we're talking about how to be rational about it. And I love this idea of managing your fear to zero. Yes. Candace, thank you so much. This has been a long time coming. I so appreciate you. Everyone, you can see Candace's book back there, but it is here, A Cool Girl's Guide to Courage. Honestly, I love it. And I'm going to take out all these stickies and send it to my niece. I might wait to get it signed by you first.
Ooh, let's do it.
She'll like that. Marley is her name. I adore her. She's so smart and bright. I just feel like I send her books all, because she has, don't tell her mom, I know she's on here. She has everything else. So I got to send her books. But I love it. And I didn't ask you about this. I'll just ask you real quick. And anyone, if you have any other questions, what made you decide to focus on a young age? Like you said, high schoolers, for example, because we're talking here on LinkedIn, obviously, about professional women, entrepreneurs, et cetera. But it sounds like you made a decision or came to the conclusion that women and girls need to start thinking about courage earlier on.
Yeah. And this was just where I started my business 3.5 years ago. I had to make a choice. That's another thing. A lot of times we don't make decisions. We don't make the decision to move forward. But I had to make a choice about what audience I wanted to focus on. And I just thought that I was going to start here with high schoolers and, young people, because I do recognize how important it is for them to be able to conjure their courage. During the pandemic, I pivoted to talk to young professionals and emerging leaders, older people. But the beauty is that this book I self-published when I was young in business and was focusing on youth. So even though this book is coming out now, it kind of, is a nod to where I started my business. And girls need it. Young women need it. Grown women need it. So I think it relates to all types of women of all ages. So yeah.
Excellent. I love it. Candace, thank you so much. You're fantastic. Hopefully you know how much I admire you and your work. This is wonderful. Everyone, you can find Candace. Well, you could tell us more where you are, Candace, but you can see her website there, and I'll make sure it's in the bio, CandaceDoby.com. But tell everyone where to go to find out more about the book or anything else about you that you have going on.
You can go to coolgirlscourage.com. You can go to my website. You're going to get all the things at my website, but I'm at Candace Doby on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Excellent. Candace, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I see here from Laura, I just want to acknowledge you. You said, you're the author of Are You Being Less Than Honest with Yourself? I want to, on Amazon, I need to get live like you ladies. Laura, send me a private message. I don't understand your question exactly or what your comment is, but I don't want to, I don't ignore nobody unless you're saying something crazy. I don't think this is crazy. I think this is a legitimate question. I just don't understand. But tell me what you're looking for. And if I can help, you can send me a message on LinkedIn or Candace, and we can share whatever we have time to or able to support you. Thank you all so much. Candace, hold on for just a second.